In her new book called Dead Aid, Oxford-trained economist Dambisa Moyo says Western aid is a waste of money because it has made Africa poorer. We are glad to welcome her into the studio with us this morning. Dambisa, thanks so much for coming in to talk about this.
Thank you.
First and foremost, so you have your book right here,
Yes.
Dead Aid, Why Aid is Not Working and How There is a Better Way for Africa. Because I almost assume at a very basic level, you're seeing some negative kickback. I mean, celebrities, Geldof, Bono, I mean, trying to get Western donors, really, and even Western businesses to give money to Africa.
Right. I think the most important thing is to first clarify what aid I'm talking about. I'm not talking about humanitarian or emergency aid. There's clearly a moral imperative for that kind of intervention. Nor am I talking about NGOs or charities. That to me is small beer compared to the big billion-dollar packages that go from government to government. The notion of celebrities, I think, is actually a red herring, not very interesting, nor is it important.
So you don't think sort of celebrities using the fact that they're well known to raise awareness, you don't think that helps in any way?
I don't think so, because in general, their messaging tends to be quite negative overall about Africa and what Africa needs. And perhaps more importantly, there are African leaders, elected officials, who are charged with the responsibility of delivering growth and reducing poverty across the continent.
So you say it undermines their local authority?
Well, I think we would love to hear from them. And I think, like Americans, would love to hear from their leadership and administration about the credit crisis, and not from celebrities from outside the United States. Very similarly, Africans are concerned about the way the continent is going. Over 60% of the population is under the age of 24. We need to have a plan and an understanding what our leadership and governments are looking to do in the long term. And I think they are the best equipped to at least start to articulate a plan on what their views are.
I read, obviously, a little bit of the excerpt from your book and some research as well. And you say it's not a bad idea for Africa to go the way of Asia, wean itself from international aid. But can you really compare African economy with the Asian continent's economy? I mean, the Asian economy seems like it has a lot more growth. It has its own resources. Not that Africa doesn't have hard resources, but financially, how does that break down?
Well, I guess two things I'd say. First of all, there are countries on the African continent, such as South Africa, such as Botswana, that actually have mirrored the economic development style of that of Asia. So it's clearly possible. And the second thing I would say is that let's remember that places like China were actually poorer than a number of African countries just 20, 30 years ago. So it's actually possible to transform these economies rather dramatically. And what I'm really emphasizing in the book is that it's important for us as a global society to push those policies that we know work. They've worked for China and India. They've worked for places like South Africa. And they can work for the broader African continent. And we know that those policies are not aid-based policies. They're policies on trade, policies in foreign direct investment, and free markets, albeit in a regulated fashion. Obviously, what's happened in the capital markets is a reminder that, unchecked or unfettered capitalism may not be the way to go.
And I know you say clearly in your book that the number one obstacle to Africa really sort of reaching this state of financial independence is actually foreign aid. What is the number two reason?
Well, I think it's all linked. Really, the political environment is linked to the aid culture, dependency. But I think what it really is at the issue is the fact that with aid, you get a situation where the Africans themselves are disenfranchised. They find it much more difficult to hold their governments accountable when countries are not seen to be on the right track for growth, or when the governments are not delivering in terms of education and infrastructure and healthcare, because the governments spend an inordinate amount of time catering to donors. And very often African governments don't like that either. They feel like there's a lot of meddling going on. But I think essentially what the point is aid disenfranchises Africans.
Do you think it's possible in this kind of global economy for Africa or any, say, emerging market to raise debt? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's the right time.
Well, I would say a couple things. I think this is a fantastic time for African countries to start to innovate. We need to get off of this mindset that we're going to go back to, same old and focusing only on the aid-dependent model. Now, I would clarify and say that, bailout packages are something we should be discussing, but we should also be encouraging African governments to move on into something that different innovative package and financing.
Dambisa Moyo, we're so glad you came in to talk to us about this interesting. Thank you very much.